investing into altcoins might be really hard as there are so many, and that's why I've created this video with 5 altcoins you need to watch if you want to invest for the upcoming bull run. The altcoins are firing up, and I've spent all my time analyzing the macroeconomic behavior of the markets, and on top of that we have also researched the altcoin markets to see which ones are going to yield the potentially highest return. And therefore I would like to ask you one favor, to just subscribe to this YouTube channel, as more than 40% of you aren't subscribed to the channel. Now, as the markets are firing up, we need to talk about the altcoins, and it's always a very catchy title to say top 5 altcoins to watch and monitor. And that's why I wanted to make a little switch. But before we talk about the 5 altcoins, I think a general overview makes a lot of sense. So there's a lot of sentiment switch taking place. Retail isn't here in the markets as of yet. And the altcoin index, or the altcoin season indicator, isn't really showing that we are in one. So it's currently having a number of 29, and it's a measure between 0 to 100. Anything above 50 is positive, basically. Anything south of 50, we're still in a Bitcoin season. So this minimal move that we've seen on the altcoins, where some of them have tripled or done a 4x, is great, but it's just barely the start, which means that if we look at the altcoin returns and the cycles, we can also start popping up the money flow cycle, which we often were using in the previous cycles, where Ethereum moves first, then the large caps, then the mid caps, and then eventually the smallest caps possible. I don't believe that that is really necessary to understand at this point, but it's basically also providing the amount of risk that is applied with certain assets. So if you have fiat on top of it, lowest amount of risk, technically, but you're also losing against inflation. Then you have Bitcoin, which is generally yielding between 60 to 100% year to year. And then you go into Ethereum, which is a little bit north of that, and large caps, etc., etc. Which, inversing that, is the amount of risk that you have. So Bitcoin has a certain risk, Ethereum has a risk, and the lower you go, the more risk there is. And therefore, if you want to yield yourself more return, you need to question yourself, what type of altcoins do I like to have in my portfolio? And maybe your risk appetite is not really, or your financial situation is not really providing you the ability to go into small caps. Like if I'm 22 years old, I've got a job, and I don't have any responsibilities outside of drinking beer in the weekend and doing some sports, I might be more favorable to go into smaller caps. But if I am 50 years old and I have a family, then I probably will start basing my portfolio on Bitcoin, ETH, and just a few large caps or blue chips. So that's why I made this video with certain different coins in there, to make you realize that we have multiple different ones to watch. And the first one that I would like to discuss, or two, is that we just have seen Ethereum going up, and Ethereum went up massively. We've had a 40% return against Bitcoin in just a week. And therefore, the blue chips or the large caps are the ones to watch. And the first one there is, might not be a surprise, but it's Chainlink. And the fact that I named Chainlink is basically due to the fact that we require oracles to be used to provide data in the Web3 space, to connect between Web 2 and Web 3. And I think it's the easiest play to take. It consists of 3 combinations. First of all, Ethereum ecosystem. Secondly, US institutions. And decentralized finance, which is the 3 ultimate ones for institutional adoption and for growth during this cycle. And when we look at the chart, it provides me data that we are still at an all-time low. And no, this is not where the bear market starts. But if the bull market really starts to kick in, then against Bitcoin, there's going to be a higher return. And then this is the period where you want to accumulate your position. So I think you would rather want to focus on the Bitcoin valuation instead of the USDT valuation. So that's the first one, if you're looking at a more safe way of investing into altcoins. The second one is in line with that. So it's a large cap, which implies less risk, which implies a less upwards return. It's Aave, which is also being bought up by Trump, and which is basically connected with Chainlink and is very likely to be integrated within the traditional banking structure, where they are going to add DeFi protocols where you can get yield on your Bitcoin or your Ether or whatever you want, where you store it with a bank and then get that return that you're looking for, which is higher than the traditional banking sector. And if we look at the chart, it's quite similar as Chainlink, although it has been starting to start its uptrend, but it's just barely minimal as of yet. And that's why I think that given the fact that we're still so far away from the previous all-time high, USD valuations do not make much sense. You want to look at the Bitcoin valuations. And I think that based on this and the amount of pain that we were suffering, there's a lot of upside to be gained, even with the large caps, and you don't need to go outside of the boundaries that much. But if you're looking for large caps, then the next two are going to be interesting. As I said, the money flow cycle for altcoins is basically the inverse when it comes to risk. So the bottom has the highest risk possible. But if we just explain that if you're, depending on your financial situation, you would like to have smaller caps if you would like to add more risk. And therefore, I've got two smaller caps. And the one that I'm explaining first is the one that I think is the most interesting, which is Wormhole. I've been covering this one a lot, and Wormhole is in our portfolio, of course, and it's quite... The only thing that I've been seeing on Wormhole is the fact that it has been going down a lot, and it's covered in the Binance VC listing stuff. But actually, it's doing a lot of great things, and there was the update that FNAC is basically launching the fee bill fund, tokenized or securitized tokens, within Wormhole, and Wormhole is being used to transfer between the chains. And this principle is also being used as exclusive provider for BlackRock, Apollo, and Mercado Bitcoin, and some more companies that have 3 billion in AUM that are using Wormhole to transfer between the chains. And transferring between the chains is yielding you a certain revenue, and that revenue is going back in the system, etc. So I think that on that regard, the amount of partnerships they have and the expectation that we have that tokenized assets are going to be big, I think the valuation of Wormhole is currently super low, and the TA provides the actual approval on that, as we have a weekly bullish divergence, which is slowly starting to play out. So I think that based on newer assets and lower valuations, this is the one that we need to look at in terms of upside if you're looking to add some smaller coins. The second one is a relatively small project with a massive ecosystem, which is in a new ecosystem that I think is going to start growing fast. It's called Deepin. I've done an interview with Leo before. I've made videos on this one before. It's the largest ecosystem within the machine economy. And as recently, one of the Deepin projects called Grass has been doing great. I think this one will follow through. And it's called Peak, as it is finally waking up again. And there are more than 50 companies on board and way more than that in Web2 partnerships. So there is also a massive growth in the amount of transactions that we see. So I think that having such an amount of growth, same with Wormhole, same with the following, is interesting for an investment thesis. And that is where I personally get interested into it, because I think that it's fundamental season. And when we look at the valuations and if we look at the chart, you can see that during the first correction, basically, the first sellers have been taking place. Add on top of that we have seen macroeconomics going terrible for crypto. So I think that it's going to inverse quite quickly, where the machine economy is going to expand even more. So I think that this is, if you talk about being more on the risk curve, this is one to keep an eye on. And the final one that I wanted to discuss is a very small one. It's a favorite of mine that I think will continue to do well and is a small cap. It's an advertising project, Alchemy. I've been discussing this one for I think it's a year now, and I've been very connected with the team. We have been investing into Alchemy and into Peak through our MN Capital Fund, in which we try to utilize and provide more impact for those projects. And it's interesting with Alchemy. The recent correction from 50 cents to 10 cents is entirely macro driven. Because in the meantime, the revenue has gone 4x from 1.2 million to 5 million. The amount of daily transactions has a standard of 10 million now, where I remember that a year ago it was just 1 million transactions per day. They have massive partnerships, and there is way more on that side to come. So I think that looking into revenue generating businesses, the past 3 are super important to understand and to look at, because all of those have been suffering from external factors while they have been continuing to build. So now you see 2 bigger ones and 3 smaller ones that you need to look at when it comes to the portfolios or when it comes to your portfolio. And the question is, how should you actually allocate funds in them? When it comes to altcoins, it's always tricky to look at investments and the size of the allocations. And the general mantra is, the larger the market cap, the longer it's in business, the larger your allocation can be, because the lower the risk is involved. The smaller and newer the project, the smaller the allocation, because the larger the risk is involved with them. And that is how you should be approaching these 5 projects that I mentioned to you. And again, it's not financial advice. With some of them, we are connected, so we can't be unbiased with them entirely. And I don't know for sure how high they are going to go or what they are going to be doing. But from fundamental thesis and the metrics that I see, I think that the liquid markets at this point provide substantial returns. And I think that adding small allocations to the smaller caps and relatively larger allocations to the large caps is what you should be doing. And my advice would be to just protect the downside as much as possible and build a plan surrounding your investments if you do that with the altcoins that you have. And again, I hope you have been enjoying this update. I'll be back with new ones during the upcoming week, which is Dutch Blockchain Week. If you're going to be there, let us know in the comments beneath. Maybe we can meet up, have a small chat about this market, and I'll see you again through the next week. Ciao! During these markets, I'm always looking for opportunities to build my portfolio, and OKX is bringing you an opportunity. They are the first fully licensed exchange in Europe with the lowest fees. And to help you a little bit with your portfolio and to celebrate this milestone, they are giving away up to 50 euros in Bitcoin if you sign up today on the exchange. Signing up can be done within 5 minutes, and if you deposit 100 euros worth of crypto, you'll receive the first 20 euros in Bitcoin. Start rebuilding your portfolio today. Go to the link in the description or scan the QR code and enjoy up to 50 euro in Bitcoin.